We have also agreed to sustain, if not further, the visits and cooperation between the French Navy and the Philippine Navy.
The size of China's displacement of the world balance is such that the world must find a new equilibrium, Lee Kuan Yew once warned. Reminding smaller states that survival in a shifting order depends not on size, but on foresight and strong partnerships. That logic now plays out clearly in the Philippines' push for its first defense pact with a European power, unfolding at the Paris Defense and Strategy Forum in March 2026. As Manila moves toward finalizing a status of visiting forces agreement with France, following months of expanded joint drills, including the 2025 deployment of the French carrier Charles de Gaulle, this step signals more than routine diplomacy. It reflects a country adjusting to a harder reality at sea, widening its circle of deterrence beyond traditional partners as sustained pressure in the West Philippine Sea reshapes its strategic choices. To understand why this moment matters, one must look beyond the headlines into the geography that exposes the Philippines, the alliances it is steadily building, the pressure that drives these choices, and the wider return of global powers into Indo-Pacific waters. Each of these layers tells part of the story, and together they explain how a single agreement in Paris fits into a much larger shift now unfolding across the region. Let's begin our discussion. Great powers seek partners when the balance of power begins to shift against them, John Mearsheimer once observed, capturing a truth that echoes far beyond major powers alone. That logic now finds relevance in Southeast Asia, where the Philippines' push for its first defense pact with France at the Paris Defense and Strategy Forum in March 2026 reflects more than routine diplomacy. It reflects pressure accumulated over years, tensions at sea, repeated confrontations in contested waters, and the growing realization that security in the Indo-Pacific is no longer a temporary challenge but a permanent condition. The proposed status of visiting forces agreement with France is not just legal paperwork, it is the mechanism that turns partnership into presence, allowing structured training, coordinated deployments, and sustained operational cooperation. What makes this moment stand out is timing and momentum working together. French naval deployments, including the 2025 operations of the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle alongside Philippine forces, have already shown that Europe is no longer a distant observer of Asian tensions. Step by step, Manila has widened its circle of partners, building a layered network rather than relying on a single shield. Seen in this light, the Paris Initiative becomes more than a bilateral move. It becomes the opening scene of a larger story. One where the Philippines is learning that survival in contested waters depends not on isolation, but on carefully built connections that stretch far beyond its immediate horizon. Geopolitics at its core begins with the map. As Robert D. Kaplan often reminds readers, geography does not argue, it simply sits there, shaping decisions whether leaders like it or not. The Philippines is a perfect example of this quiet but relentless force. Stretching across more than 7,600 islands, the country sits on the eastern rim of the South China Sea, facing waters that carry nearly one-third of global maritime trade every year. These are not empty seas. They are crowded highways of oil tankers, cargo vessels, and naval patrols. Beneath those same waters lie rich fishing grounds that feed millions and energy deposits long believed to hold significant gas reserves. That is the blessing. The exposure, however, lies in the same geography. Places like Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal are not distant dots on a chart. They sit along key approaches that shape movement across the wider region. Over the past year, repeated confrontations near these areas, water cannon incidents, blocking maneuvers, and prolonged shadowing have turned geography into daily pressure rather than distant theory. Look closely at the Philippine map and the challenge becomes obvious. Its islands form long, broken chains rather than a single solid landmass. Supply ships traveling to remote outposts must cross open water, often through narrow approaches that are easy to monitor and difficult to secure alone. Even northern Luzon, facing Taiwan across the Bashi Channel, sits near one of the most sensitive maritime corridors in Asia, a passage used by naval forces moving between the Pacific Ocean and the South China Sea. This is why geography leaves Manila little room for complacency. The country cannot move its islands, cannot shorten its coastlines, and cannot close the sea around it. What it can do is reinforce these waters with presence. That is why joint patrols, surveillance flights, and multinational naval exercises have increased in recent years, particularly around the northern and western approaches. In strategic terms, the West Philippine Sea has become more than a territorial question. It has become the center of gravity for national security planning. Every new partnership, every visiting force agreement, every expanded exercise ultimately traces back to the same reality: the shape of the map. Pressure begins in these waters, and so the response must begin there as well. Geography, as history has shown time and again, sets the stage long before strategy enters the room. Diplomats often say that alliances are not built in calm waters. They are built when pressure begins to rise. Philippine defense leaders have echoed a similar line in recent years. Security today is no longer about standing beside one partner, but about standing within a network. That shift is now visible. The Philippines is no longer building its defense posture around a single pillar. It is practicing what strategists call external balancing, a simple but powerful idea in security policy. Spread the risk, build layers, make deterrence collective. The United States remains the anchor under the Mutual Defense Treaty, but the web has widened. Japan has stepped in with coastal radar systems and patrol vessels. Australia has expanded rotational training and joint maritime drills. Canada and New Zealand have joined multilateral patrols that were once limited to a much smaller group. What used to be bilateral security is slowly turning into network deterrence. This widening web became clearer during 2024 and 2025 when joint maritime patrols in the West Philippine Sea began to include several partners operating together. These were not symbolic sail-throughs. They were presence operations, meant to show coordination, improve interoperability, and reinforce maritime domain awareness, terms often used in naval planning, but rooted in simple logic. Ships that train together respond faster under pressure. France enters this picture as a new and important link. For the first time, Manila is reaching beyond its Pacific Circle and drawing in a European partner with real naval capability. French participation in joint drills, carrier deployments, and future visiting forces arrangements signals a shift in mindset. The Philippines is no longer building isolated alliances, it is building layers of reassurance. Each new partner adds depth to the security web, widening the strategic space around the country. France's role in Philippine security planning is not accidental, and it is definitely not symbolic. Many people still see France as a distant European power, but the map tells a different story. France is an Indo-Pacific nation by geography, not just by policy. Its territories in New Caledonia and French Polynesia place French citizens and large maritime zones directly inside the Indo-Pacific, giving Paris a reason to stay present, not just interested. That presence is now becoming more visible. Over the past few years, French naval deployments, including missions led by the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, have moved repeatedly through Southeast Asian waters, signaling that France intends to remain a steady actor in this region, not a temporary visitor. But strategy is not only about ships sailing, it is also about capacity being built. In recent years, France has quietly backed some of the Philippines' most practical maritime upgrades. One of the clearest examples is the patrol boat program now underway between Manila and Paris. Philippine Coast Guard signed a deal worth about $25.8 billion or roughly $438 million for 40 fast patrol boats from French shipbuilder OSHA, with first deliveries expected to begin in 2026. These vessels are not small symbolic assets. They are designed for surveillance, law enforcement, and rapid response missions across Philippine waters. Even more important, 20 of the 40 boats are planned to be built locally in the Philippines, allowing technology transfer and long-term maintenance support. For Manila, France brings something different from its traditional partners, a European power that combines diplomacy, naval reach, and industrial capability. And across Europe, a similar pattern is emerging. Stability in the Indo-Pacific is now seen as tied directly to global trade and energy security, especially since a large share of European commerce depends on sea routes that pass through Asian waters. In that sense, France's growing engagement is part of a wider return of European maritime thinking after decades of relative distance. On paper, a status of visiting forces agreement, what strategists call a SOVFA, can look dry and technical. Just legal language, rules, and procedures. But in real-world security, these agreements often decide whether ships can dock, aircraft can land, or troops can train when it matters most. Without them, even friendly forces move slowly, tied down by legal uncertainty. With them, cooperation becomes routine. That is why the negotiations between Manila and Paris, completed in late 2025 and now moving toward formal adoption, matter far more than they appear at first glance. They create the legal doorway that allows forces to operate smoothly inside each other's territory, turning friendship into function. There is a reason the Philippines has relied heavily on similar agreements with partners like the United States and Australia. Those frameworks made possible some of the largest recent exercises across Philippine territory, including operations in northern Luzon, where forces now train near sea lanes facing Taiwan, and along the western coastline overlooking the West Philippine Sea. These drills are not small events anymore. In recent years, multinational exercises have involved thousands of troops, dozens of aircraft, and coordinated naval formations, all moving under shared legal protections that make planning predictable. A French SOFA would extend this same logic to European forces, allowing French ships, surveillance aircraft, and amphibious units to train repeatedly rather than visit only once. The real power of a SOFA lies in what it quietly changes behind the scenes. Diplomacy builds trust, but legal frameworks build readiness. They answer practical questions. Who has jurisdiction? Where can forces deploy? How fast can help arrive? These details rarely make headlines, yet they shape the speed of response during crisis. If finalized, the SOFA between France and the Philippines will do more than add another partner. It will give that partnership structure, rhythm, and staying power. Agreements on paper mean little until ships begin to move. That is where the story naturally continues from legal frameworks to real activity at sea. In 2025, the French carrier strike group led by the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle sailed into waters near northern Luzon and trained alongside Philippine forces. It was not a quiet port visit. Fighter aircraft launched sorties, ships maneuvered in formation, and communication drills tested how quickly two distant militaries could speak the same operational language. Later that same year, French vessels, including surveillance frigates, joined exercises off Mindanao, showing that the cooperation was not a one-time display, but part of a growing pattern. These were not symbolic moves. They were signals, visible to anyone watching the region closely. In naval strategy, presence itself becomes a message. When large warships operate together in contested waters, they communicate readiness without firing a shot. For Manila, hosting advanced platforms from carrier groups to amphibious ships strengthens what planners call maritime domain awareness and forward presence, two key ideas in modern naval doctrine. For France, repeated deployments show that its Indo-Pacific role is not theoretical but operational. Recent multinational exercises in Philippine waters have grown steadily in size, with thousands of troops and multiple naval and air assets participating, especially in recurring drills like Balikatan, which has expanded significantly in scale since 2023. Each exercise adds familiarity. Each maneuver reduces hesitation. But the real power behind these drills lies in something less visible: interoperability. Modern deterrence is no longer about counting ships alone. It is about whether forces from different countries can function as one when pressure rises. That is why recent exercises have focused heavily on shared command procedures, synchronized communications, and coordinated response drills. In practical terms, this means aircraft from one country can receive guidance from another, ships can share targeting information, and rescue or defense missions can unfold without confusion. These are not ceremonial exercises. They are operational rehearsals meant to prepare for worst-case scenarios that leaders hope will never come. For the Philippines, this approach offers a quiet advantage. Instead of trying to build a massive fleet overnight, a costly and slow process, it strengthens capability through cooperation. A smaller navy linked to capable partners becomes more resilient than its size suggests. This is how deterrence grows today, not through isolated strength, but through connected strength. Every alliance has a story behind it, and in this case, the quiet force shaping Manila's choices is hard to miss. China is rarely named directly in every agreement, yet its actions sit in the background of nearly all recent Philippine security decisions. Over the past few years, the pattern has become too consistent to ignore. Philippine resupply missions to 2nd Thomas Shoal have repeatedly faced obstruction, including water cannon attacks in 2023 and 2024 that damaged vessels and injured crew members. By 2025 and into early 2026, Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia presence around contested features had grown more regular, not occasional. In some areas, dozens of Chinese vessels have been recorded operating near Philippine-held positions at the same time. Turning routine supply runs into tense standoffs rather than logistical tasks. What once looked like isolated encounters now appears as a steady method, pressure applied slowly, persistently, and in full view. This pattern has forced a shift in Manila's thinking. Philippine defense planners are no longer reacting to single incidents. They are responding to what looks like a sustained campaign of maritime pressure. Surveillance patrols have increased. Joint maritime operations with partners have expanded. Intelligence sharing, what military planners call maritime domain awareness, has become more important than ever. The reasoning is defensive, not provocative. When pressure repeats itself often enough, doing nothing becomes riskier than building new partnerships. In this environment, cooperation is not about signaling aggression. It is about reducing exposure. The Philippines is not moving outward because it wants confrontation. It is doing so because geography and repeated incidents have narrowed its room to maneuver. China's growing naval and coast guard capacity adds another layer to this reality. Over the past decade, China has built what is now considered the largest coast guard fleet in the world, supported by maritime militia vessels that operate alongside regular forces. This expansion changes the balance at sea, not through direct conflict, but through constant presence. Agreements with France and other partners should be understood through this lens. They are not random diplomatic gestures or prestige projects. They are calculated responses to a shifting balance of power, responses shaped by repeated encounters at sea and the recognition that pressure, if left unanswered, tends to grow. Europe's renewed interest in the Indo-Pacific is no longer theoretical, it is visible at sea. France has taken the lead, but it is not alone. In recent years, several European navies have increased their deployments into Asian waters, conducting freedom of navigation missions, joint exercises, and port visits across Southeast Asia. These actions reflect a growing recognition that Europe's economic stability depends heavily on maritime trade routes that pass through the Indo-Pacific. Disruptions in these waters would not remain regional problems, they would ripple into European markets and industries. France's role stands out because of its sustained presence. With overseas territories and permanent forces stationed across the Indo-Pacific, Paris has both the legal authority and operational capability to act as a resident power. Its naval deployments over the past few years, including carrier-led missions and frigate patrols, have demonstrated continuity rather than occasional engagement. This steady rhythm of presence has made France a credible partner for countries like the Philippines seeking dependable external support. The broader European shift signals something deeper about global security trends. The Indo-Pacific is no longer seen as a distant theater, but as a central arena of strategic competition. As European states return to these waters, they bring with them new diplomatic weight and military capability. For Manila, this creates an opportunity to diversify its partnerships and widen its strategic horizon.